Welcome to SmallTalk by Sfarim Chatter. I'm Nachi Weinstein. On this episode of SmallTalk, I'm going to be joined by Rabbi Dr. Yosef Sokol, who is professor at Torah University and research scientist at the Department of Veteran Affairs, and he gives a shiur at Landers College for Men on halachos related to psychotherapy, as well as the author of the new book, Becoming Godly, published by Mosaic Press, which we'll be discussing on this episode. And also want to mention that this episode is sponsored by Torah University. So thank you, Yosef, for joining me.
Thank you so much. It's an honor to be on here. I am a listener, and it's really cool to be here myself.
Tell the listeners about your book, Becoming Godly.
Sure. So Becoming Godly is meant to integrate a perspective that I have developed from Torah over many years about what are we here for, what are we doing with life, what does Hashem want from us, with the insights I have learned from as a clinical psychologist, both in my training as well as my own research program about identity, meaning, and suicide. And I have discovered that these two approaches inform each other and enable us to have a unified way of looking at the world, what we're here for, and how to achieve meaning and purpose. And Becoming Godly is my attempt to put that all together and to look at different areas of Judaism through that unified perspective.
So how does one combine Torah and psychology?
Yeah, that would be the critical question here. And it's not a simple one. And honestly, I'm kind of worried that I got it wrong, but I did my best. Fundamentally, the idea is based on the realization that the human mind, as it is and as it works, was created by Hashem in a specific way for a specific purpose. Therefore, the Torah, which is meant as our guide for perfection, and the human mind, which is what we use to achieve that, should have the same fundamental reality in both. They should be one objective reality that we can look at through the lens of the Torah as well as empirical science from psychology. Integrating does not mean, therefore, validating either of the two. And I think it's honestly a little silly to think that we could show the Torah is true through psychology, or wow, the Torah already preceded psychology and found these things. I'm totally uninterested in that. What I am interested in is in showing how through an in-depth understanding of each of these, we can better understand the other.
Right. So it's not what people might think it is, what you're saying. You're validating one. It's not what this is. Clearly not.
Some people might be interested in that. Kol hakavod, they're welcome to do that. For whatever reason, that does not appeal to me. I'm just interested in how do we understand, the psychology better through the insights of the Torah gives us about what we're here for and what we're doing and why. And vice versa. How can we understand some of what the Torah says about how to achieve growth and how to become close to Hashem through our empirical findings about what people find meaning in and how identity works?
Right. So let's talk about that. You talk about some of this and self-creation through choice, and you talk about choice momentum, some different things. Let's, I think, delve into the book a little bit, and let's try to explain a little bit for the listeners what some of these concepts and ideas mean.
Sure. So the core fundamental principle the book is based on is the idea that through our choices, we change ourselves. And not only that, we actually are creating who we are. The sum of our choices over our life is a fundamental part of our identity, our existence, and our self in this world. That single idea fits both with what the Torah says about Ramchal, many others, about how our goal is to become, to be good in this world, which is to make ourselves closer and more similar to Hashem, and also fits very well with psychological principles about how our identity works and how we change ourselves and our choices that we make. So self-creation is the idea that through our choices, we are creating ourselves and therefore can be more similar to Hashem as an uncreated being, as a being that nothing else created. And also means that we can be similar to Hashem in the sense that we can follow his midos as we can perceive them as revealed by the Torah, by Hashem's actions in the world, and thereby make ourselves into a being that, as we can, insofar as we're able to, is similar to Hashem.
Is this a new thought? This is your idea, or this comes from elsewhere?
That's an excellent question. I think, as best I understand it, this is an old idea that I am understanding in a new, rich way through new research and better understanding through science about how humans work. So it's neither old nor it is new. It is old and new, as I think many ideas evolve over time.
Interesting. Okay, so now you talk about choice momentum. What does that mean?
So, not all choices are born equally. Some choices are easy for us to make, some are very challenging. And that's partially because of all of the momentum that is pushing us in a certain direction. So, for example, technically, I could go out into a church and convert to Christianity today. But there is so much momentum from everything about myself, both my family, my background, my choices that I've already made in the past, my identity, that it's practically meaningless. That possibility isn't a meaningful possibility. So it's not like I'm changing myself and growing by not converting to Christianity. So we have momentum. Our choices push us in a certain direction. When we most self-create when we change away from our momentum. When we make a choice that is not obvious, that is not easy. If I'm challenged by, I don't know, let's say I don't know, it's hard for me to diet and I'm trying to diet. I'm making a choice that's difficult. I've changed myself by making that choice. That's the idea of we have choice momentum, and the true self-creation is mostly taking place in the area in which choices are both kind of plausible, psychologically reasonable, and therefore our choices we make change ourselves in that area, as opposed to something that is not likely, not plausible, then doesn't change ourselves. And for the kind of the sophisticated listener may realize that this has similarities to Rav Dessler's Nekudas HaBechira. I kind of analyze that in my book. I show that we can kind of go a little further and address it in different nuanced ways that give, I think, a more of a kind of a rigorous sense of what Bechira means beyond the specific area that Rav Dessler talks about. But that's kind of a bit of a deep dive there.
Right. I was going to say, this really has to do with Bechira. So, yes. How you tie Bechira into all of this, essentially, that's what a lot of this is. So, and that's interesting in the book in and of itself. Like, you're discussing psychological concepts and psychology, but then you're kind of integrating them. You're showing, you're using the Torah with it as well. Not showing, but you're using the Torah with it as well.
I love the catch there, and precisely correct.
Yeah. What are some other, you mentioned over there of Dessler, what are some other Torah sources that you focus on in the book?
So one source, my primary source that I use throughout is really the Ramchal. I'd love to consider myself a student of the Ramchal. I just absolutely love his works across the many, many, many areas that he's written. Just a wonderful mind that we can just, the systematic, the insight, the ability. What I find most meaningful, to some degree, why I use it, I think, so much, is the systematic nature of its ability to be applied to everything. So really, psychology is just another area that I could apply the Ramchal's model to. I need to do a little bit of work with it too. But that's why I found the Ramchal just this wonderful kind of overarching system to use. But I love the Rambam, I love the Kuzari, I love many other sources too. So obviously, I'm not going to limit myself to the Ramchal. So those are, I think, I would say those three are my primary, the Ramchal, the Rambam, and the Kuzari, but I also use many other sources as they are relevant, including Hasidic sources, Rav Tzaddik I use, including, I kind of get as modern as Rav Dessler, but most of my sources are a little bit more traditional, I would say classic, older sources.
Some other things you discuss the struggle people have with living a double life. People have professional world, Ben Torah, the two different kind of worlds. If that's what you mean by double life, we should explain what you mean by double life. But there are kind of different definitions there. But what do you mean by that? And then, talk about that a little bit.
Sure. So identity is complicated. Who we are is very confusing. And as we go through our life, we find ourselves in different areas, different kind of environmental situations that all of the norms, the rewards, the consequences kind of differ. So, for example, in shul, what does it mean to be a normal, healthy individual, and what is meaningful and what is not, is fundamentally apparently different than what it would be in your job as, who knows what, a lawyer or whatever it may be. Like they feel like different structures in which to live. And many people experience this as what you can call a double life. I am me in one way in this sense, and I am me in another way in that sense. And as we know from psychological findings and Torah findings, when there is this disparity in the self, there's confusion and complexity in one's identity, it is not good for you. It's all mental health reasons, but also in terms of being able to have meaning and purpose. Double lives aren't kind of psychologically helpful. What I have found, though, is that this perspective I have of kind of based on Torah and psychology allows us to have a unified perspective on both. So, for example, if Hashem in this world is different, acts differently based on the requirements of the situation, because he has the same higher order goal for this world, but based on whether it's, I don't know, this generation or 1,000 years ago, that higher order goal ends up doing something different in this world. His midos come out differently. You can call it spheros, you can call it whatever you want, but it ends up being different based on the situation that the actions are taking place within. The same fundamental value, meaning, purpose, can apply differently based on situation. What I try to show is that if you, at your work, you're embodying the principles of good in this world as a single unified system as it applies to work, and you do the same as it applies to shul, both are equally you and both are equally, in deep sense, religious practices. If at work you have the, so to speak, the right frame and the right intent, and you're truly living by it, I believe everything you do at work is ruchnius. As in comparison, I think many people, I think some things that they do in ruchnius are really not ruchni. It's the frame, the unified frame is what gives it all a single meaning and allows us to then develop a single unified identity in all areas of our life. And there's a beautiful story Rav Hutner said, probably many of you people are familiar with this, but it's just a lovely story worth repeating. He tells one of his students had trouble in this area, and he told him a story about this doctor that before he would go into surgery, he would to do surgery, he would ask the patient what the mother's name is. So he would say some Tehillim before he would do the surgery with that person. That is obviously not somebody that has two separate identities. This is one identity. The actual surgery is a religious, meaningful practice for this doctor, Rabbi Wallach.
Another thing you discuss in the book is parenting, and you frame this as the ultimate kind of emulation of Hashem as a creator. What does that mean, and how does that perspective, how does that shift, how do you view that helping people?
That's the ultimate also chapter of my book. Kind of everything builds towards that, because I think parenting, in a really deep, profound sense, allows us to do something that nothing else in our life can. As the Ramchal says, our ultimate purpose is to be as similar to Hashem as possible, because that is the highest good, and Hashem created the world to achieve the highest good. One of the things we know about Hashem is that He's a creator. He is not just doing good, He is creating the possibility of good. He is us, we are His creations. What that means for us is that what we can learn and try to be similar to Hashem is to do the same, to create beings. What does that mean, though? It's not that physical act of creation. That's much less meaningful. What Hashem as a creator is doing is constantly creating a structure and a frame for us to become like Him, or to become the greatest good as possible. That is parenting. What parenting can be, I think, should be seen as, is a way for us to embody Hashem in this world as helping people become the best possible people they can be. That's doing the greatest good we can possibly do. With that has enormous implications for all sorts of questions and ways to think about parenting. But one really basic and obvious one would be, how do I balance that I love my child, therefore I want to give them everything, and I want my child to not be a spoiled brat, therefore I don't want to give them all sorts of things. And we could just take this perspective and apply it. Hashem, Kaviyachal, has the same question with us. Hashem wants to do the good directly to us, have us experience all good. But if He does that, we are not becoming like Him. We are not self-creating, and we will not have, so to speak, emulate His midas. Hashem's solution, as we can understand it in this world, is by giving us autonomy within a structure. Hashem gives us bechira, which is the most remarkable and impossible to understand thing that Hashem has done in this world to some degree. And Hashem gives us a framework within which we can do bechira that is limited. Giving good within a framework that best allows us to develop ourselves is the same perspective that we could have towards our children. We want to show them that we love them, but we also want to show them the correct perspective on what helping each other is, and to enable them to themselves self-create to embody those midas. So yeah, I wouldn't say it's a simple answer, but that is one, and honestly, there's endless amount of ways to consider parenting. So maybe someday I'll write a book on parenting using this perspective. But we can think about many things in parenting from the perspective how Hashem acts towards us.
So what was it like writing this book? Were these things, with these chapters and these topics, things that you had given shiurim or lectures on, or this is something you just set out to write the book?
As with many things, the answer is neither, both. There's some combination. So some of this is really just things I've realized over the years as I'm a practicing psychologist as well as a researcher. And these are just things that have occurred to me as I'm talking to my clients, as I'm doing research studies, having findings, as well as I'm learning the Ramchal. Kind of over the years, some of this kind of has been developing, but also I'm training some of my students in this therapy I created called CICT, Continuous Identity Cognitive Therapy, that is about identity and growth and purpose, supposed to be for suicide, but really works for many areas I've discovered. And these are from students, and they were wondering how these ideas seem to be parallel to Yiddishkeit in some ways. So I started answering their questions, and I realized I just need to spend some time devoted, and I gave a shiur to them, like 10 different shiurim, where I kind of built up this model of how this system of understanding humans, this therapy's function, how it relates to many ideas of the Torah. And then I kind of used that as the basis, but then expanded, got many feedback from a lot of people, which, as everybody who writes a book knows, just because something makes sense in your head does not mean a reader will think it makes sense. So it's been a lot of work. In fact, I will say my dissertation wasn't easy, but this was, I would say, 10 times harder. It was tremendous amount of work actually doing this and doing it in a way that is potentially understandable to mere mortals. But it is so a lot of work, but hopefully something meaningful at the end.
And that goes to the next question. So who is this book meant for? What type of people should be buying this book and reading this book in your mind?
That is a very good question that I wish I had a really good answer for, but I'm just going to tell you I've struggled with this throughout. And I think the reason why I struggled is because I think it can be relevant to so many people. Who among us doesn't ever have questions about who we are and what we're trying to do? Who among us doesn't want to build up a more meaningful life? Who among us doesn't ever question how empirical science fits with what we know is true from the Torah about humans, about what we're doing here? So in some sense, it's relevant to largely everybody. On the other hand, while I try to make it as accessible as I can, I am a scientist, I'm a researcher, so I'm going to be somewhat technical and precise. It's hard not to. I can't write a popular pop book. That's not within me. So it did limit. The end result is probably for people who have some level of sophistication, either in Torah, if you know a little bit, if you learn Derech Hashem, this book will be easier for you to go through. Or in psychology, if you've taken some courses in psychology in school, this book will be easier for you. So if you're coming, have some expertise in either, you're interested in any of the kind of a deeper understanding of the Torah. Musar is nice, but how do we apply it in our life in an intuitive, practical way from psychology? You're interested in kind of understanding how psychology relates to the Torah. Those are the people that this is for.
So what are you trying to accomplish with the book? Is that to teach people how to put things into practical application, essentially?
So I'm trying to accomplish an awful lot of things with this book, but I would say my deepest reason why I wrote this book is because I see so many people that seem to have a lack of meaning in their life and in their Yiddishkeit too. There seems to be like a disconnect between things they quote unquote know are true Torah-wise, but their actual meaning in their life. People who are very materialistic, it's hard for me to really understand how the Torah is kind of coming out in their life in a real way. And I think that part of that is because people don't connect the ideas of the Torah to their regular psychological understanding of their life and their sense of self. And I guess there's no way I'm going to actually solve that. That's not within me. But I can write a book that tries to bridge the two and to show that there is no difference. There is no distinction. If you properly understand the Torah, it will directly have meaning for your life. And vice versa. If you're thinking about your life psychologically, astutely, correctly, it will better enable you to understand the Torah. When this comes together, I'd like to think that I wrote a bit of a story in my intro. I remember seeing somebody davening, and this was back in yeshiva, right after they finished this long Shemona Esrei. After Mincha, I saw them saying something really not nice to another guy. And I was like, come on. You just spent a 15-minute Shemona Esrei. You were talking to Hashem, and then you go say this. It really bothered me. And to this day, I'm trying to think of how can we make sure that doesn't happen? And for me, this is part of it. If talking to Hashem and building it up is intuitively part of the same model and system that you think about the world as talking to other people and being a good person, then it won't make sense for that to happen for that person psychologically.
Now, just to end, you said that this was 10 times harder than a dissertation. So are you working on another book, or this is like one and done?
I am working on, the problem is once you start, it's very hard to stop. It's kind of like, Pringles. There's so much I wanted to cover in this book that I didn't. And there's so many other areas. Once I have a model, now wherever I look, I can apply it. So I wanted to cover tshuva in this book. I had a whole huge section of the book. Probably 30% was about tshuva and Yom Neram, and I took it out. And I want to kind of flesh that. I'm kind of working on going through each of the mayadim, and I'm mostly, I think, half to 3/4 done, and thinking through what mayad meant from the perspective of Klal Yisrael's development as a nation, what it means for it to exist over time historically, and what it means for us, using the same model of identity growth, identity development, and us striving to become as similar to Hashem as possible.
Fascinating. Okay, so we'll stay tuned for that. And with as it pertains to becoming godly, I'll put a link in the show notes. Anyone interested, as with all Mosaica books, I'll mention code chatter. You always get 15 off Mosaica books for those interested. So thank you, Yosef, for joining me on the podcast.
Thank you, Nachi. I really appreciate it.